toffee notes, caramel notes, all these things that are in a good porter or a stout or an English strong ale. Although that's all out the window now with the Cascadian dark ales, black IPAs, and the American craft beer revolution is all about diversity and pushing boundaries, and Americans are never happy with a car. You gotta soup it up. You get beer. You can have a German beer, and they've been doing it that way for 400 years. We start brewing and do this, and we're pushing the envelope on alcohol, pushing an envelope on bitterness,
like ABV and
and IBUs, International Bittering Units. So you get your sugar and your alcohol from the malt. With the yeast eats the sugar, makes alcohol. So you got yeast, water, malt, and hops. So you got 4 ingredients of beer. That's it. But you look at the 3,000 breweries that are in the United States now, and everybody's doing something different or pushing different boundaries. And the Germans are still doing their 6 styles of beer that they brew.
Do you find that as you push one aspect of the chemistry to get a new combination, are there qualities you're sacrificing?
Well, I guess there's always compromise and sacrifice. There's trade-offs, but there's only 4 ingredients of beer, and if you're using good water, good barley, there's 300 kinds of brewer's yeast that I have access to, 300 kinds of hops.
So that's the difference between...
There's just so many combinations. This is one company. There's, many malting companies, and they all have 30 or 40 different kinds of malt. So, I have access to 300 kinds of malt. Everybody's water chemistry is different. Hardness, softness, calcium, magnesium, whatever. So water has a flavor. So everybody's water is different. You got river water, groundwater, surface water, spring water, and they all have good or bad influences.
And is the water for the Oak Creek Brewery coming from Oak Creek? Or it's general runoff from the rim?
No, it's not surface water. It is groundwater. It's well water.
Okay. About 4 a.m. and
filming already.
The head brewer arrives.
A lot of times.
How you doing?
I'm good. Most of these lights shouldn't be on.
I got a good picture in there in the dark, though.
Usually I'll stand here and I'll wait for a shooting star. It's always a good omen.
I saw one when my car was warming up, but I can't see the sky through my lens, unfortunately. There's one.
It doesn't take long.
So, here we come for the Brewer's Hours in the Oak Creek Brewery, if I can find the door handle.
First thing we do out here is...
We'll follow Jim around.
It's dark, there's chairs, but there's a slider for the grain silo.
Ah, he's opening up the grain silo, which I don't think we can see, and I don't really have a light.
I need 1,000 pounds of grain from that grain tank.
1,000 pounds. So we'll have to film that after the sun comes up. So here's another view of the outside grain silo. Way up there.
Okay, so I walk in here and I gotta figure out who is messing around with what. Clean up some stuff, get out of my way.
Jim, how do you pronounce your last name? Strelaw? Strelaw.
Good German name. Well, when Fred and Rita Kraus started this 20 years ago, they just moved back from Germany and wanted to start a business. Rita is Bavarian. Fred worked for the army and learn how to brew over there. So they opened up a brewery and settled on Sedona. Started making beer and would self-distribute. So they go out and bars and restaurants and
Literally deliver it themselves?
hand deliver it, yep, all that. And it went from a couple hundred cases, a couple hundred kegs a year. Now we're doing about 12,000 kegs a year, 5,000, 6,000 barrels a year.
Throughout this state?
Just in the state of Arizona.
And is that because of a legal barrier?
That's just our, I can't make any more than that. You know, there's so many new breweries coming out now. The market is, it's very cutthroat out there. We've been in the industry long enough that you just know everybody from all over the country. It's great. It's such a great community. It's an amazing industry, very close-knit. Even though we have these competitors out there, you know, other breweries are our competition, but we don't really see it that way. We're all brothers. The small guys are in it together. But yeah, the brewing industry has always been a grassroots type movement. So when Fred started, you know, hand delivering, just all this relationship building from the ground up.
We try to make a so-called natural product, and I know that's a hard thing to define. But basically, the only time we stray from the purity law of 1516 of Bavaria, which says that beers are made from yeast, water, hops, and barley malt, is when the style of beer calls for a change to that prescription. And there are quite a few beers out there now where you might want to use a type of exotic sugar or molasses, but other than that, we don't use any preservatives. Our beers, for the most part, are lightly filtered, not sterile filtered, and they're not pasteurized. And with each of those steps, you lose a little bit of flavor, but when you don't take those steps, beer has to be treated right and kept cool. The other thing that we do at Oak Creek, which is of primary importance, is natural carbonation. And I won't try to explain how it's done, but suffice it to say that if you carbonate naturally, you end up with a smooth, small stream of bubbles that comes up from the middle of your glass and keeps a good constant head on the beer. Artificially carbonated beers have fish egg kinds of bubbles hanging on the side of the glass, and they taste very gassy and raw, what I would call carbonic. So that's how you can start telling the difference between a well-made, all-malt, handcrafted beer and some beers that are more mass-produced.
This is the brewing room and the actually a serving area. I mean, this is actually a place where you.
This is our production facility.
Okay.
This is technically a tasting room.
Oh, okay.
We're going to be 20 years old in a month.
So that would put you at 90.
When we built this brewery 20 years ago, there were no rules in brewing. We were rebels. Now you couldn't do a brewery like this because I got people who can just walk in the room and take a sample off the tank. But it's cool for the customers.
But
it's not cool for me.
So you're sort of grandfathered in.
I'm sure.
Smells good in here, sort of like a bakery.
Yes. So you can see the different colors of grain that we're using.
And that's going to give
All your
color like pales and ports and...
porters and stouts. This is an amber, so we have caramelized malt and we have pale malt. And later today we're gonna brew nut brown.
Oh, okay.
So you can see the 3 different colors of grain. Alright, so you got your pale malt, you got your crystal malt or caramel malt, and you got your black or chocolate malt.
Are these about 50-pound grain bags?
These are European bags.
Oh,
You can see how nice and plump these kernels are,
yeah.
which you tend to get from German and Belgian malt.
Huh?
The American malt is skinnier, and the European malt's just better. There's better growing conditions. There's many different species of malting barley that farmers use.
How long have you been at this, Jim?
20 years.
Wow.
Started cleaning tanks and cleaning kegs and floors in 1995, and worked my way up to a head brewing job in 96, and
Wow.
been a head brewer for 19 years now. I can't believe it.
Congratulations.
Yes. So this
19
mill,
years late.
it was definitely a labor of love, and I wasn't doing it to get rich. I don't think anybody in the brewing industry does it to get rich. It's something that you need to really have a passion for, and you do it without thinking. I mean, that's you know, I couldn't imagine doing anything else. I tried quitting. No sane person would do this if it was just a job. Come in, punch in, clock out. It's too much. And they said, "Are you ready to be a head brewer?" And I said, "Yes," lying through my teeth, but I would never get that opportunity again. So I was way out in the suburbs, out by myself, and it was a complete sink or swim environment. So I had to succeed. Well, you have to realize too that that first year that I was brewing, learning on the job, training, there was 3 or 4 of us who were all in the same boat, and we were working 60, 70 hours a week. Just long hours. We learned so much in that first year, and the brewmaster went to Siebel Institute, which is in Chicago. So it's a very reputable brewing school. So, you know, I just read, I had all his books and all his material, and we were all readers and studiers. We just studied the books, studied the coursework. And none of this was planned. This was just all happenstance and good luck, and finding something that you like to do, finding out that you love to do it, and finding out that, or for me, you know, something that you're really good at.
Yes.
Partner at Oak Creek Brewing Company. I work like I own the place anyways, but yeah, it's been a great journey, and it's very fortunate to have ended up here and just in the great industry that this is. All right, so we're making Hefeweizen today.
Ooh.
So I gotta turn my agitator on. Turn my hot water tank on. Our brew sheet gives us our recipe for our grain bill, our hop variety.
Your pounds.
We're using Czech saws, and we're using 5 pounds, and this is when we put them in, and we do it the same way every single time for consistency. Wheat beers tend to have more protein and different compounds than barley, so there's a little bit more complicated mashing procedure. There's a protein rest, a saccharification rest, the conversion temperature, and you just got to keep track of it as you go through.
And so what are some of the characteristics of Hefeweizen? Like, is that the citrusy sort of?
Banana-y.
Banana-y, okay.
And clovey.
Clovey.
If you use like a true Bavarian wheat yeast, the fermentation, the living yeast eats the sugar and it makes alcohol and CO2, but it also produces esters, and esters are higher levels of alcohol and flavor compounds, and some of the flavor compounds that give us that banana bread aroma is isoamylacetate, and the cloviness comes from 4-vinyl glycanol. And so we're not putting bananas in the beer, and we're not grinding up whole cloves, the spice. It's produced by the yeast, and American ale yeast and basically all the other yeast, brewing yeast, don't produce those compounds. I'm going out of town, but that's why I'm so out of it right now.
A 12-day stretch without a day off, so you can leave town for a while and keep caught up on your beer.
Yeah, I'm working from 11 at night to going to the night switch, so night shift. So it's a brutal schedule right now, so I'm a little out of it. Come on up here with me. This is about 300 gallons of water.
Oh, okay.
And we're going to be putting in about 1,100 pounds of barley and wheat into there.
1,100 pounds into about 300 gallons of water.
I shoot the water out of my blue hose to get the rubber smell out of it. Open our silo, so our grain's going to be conveyed, and it's going to drop into our kettle.
So we'll take a look at the grain silo that we couldn't see, but that's coming through the pipeway here.
Right, so we are preparing to crush our grain and mash it. That's a whole nother artistic and scientific endeavor. You know, you spend a lifetime learning how to malt and make malted barley for brewing. These are rice hulls. Rice hulls.
Oh.
Because our malted wheat does not have any husk on it. So if you just use this and crush it and add it to hot water, it'll turn real gummy. A lot of protein, a lot of gluten in it.
It has something to do with cracking the grains just to that ideal amount so that the mash doesn't get stuck.
The barley has a husk, and so what it does is when you crack it open and you are lautering it, you're basically making a filter bed. So the water, the hot water, can run through it and rinse the sugar out that we're gonna make. And you need to have, you know, it's what they call a filter aid. So we're adding these into our brew. These they don't bring any flavor or color to the party. It's just purely so we can rinse our sugar.
Okay.
Mill will actually crack the grain, And the white, all that powder, that's the starch. So you need to crack the kernel, and inside that kernel, that white part right in there, that white starchy part, the endosperm, that's what would make this one seed grow into a plant. That's the food for the plant to live. But the malting process, you germinate it, you sprout it, and then you dry it. So you kill the plant, but that germination process creates enzymes. And then that enzyme, like if you were to take a couple pieces and put them in your mouth, go ahead and do it. And you'll get some sweetness out of it. Okay, well that's your saliva activating the enzymes and turning the starch into sugar. So enzymes are turned on by heat, and certain temperatures do certain things. So it's very complicated. I could talk for hours on each step. I'm not going to. But basically, the enzymes, you have alpha and beta amylase, which will create fermentable sugars and unfermentable sugars. So we mashed this malt into certain temperatures of water to make fermentable sugar and unfermentable sugar. If you want a drier beer, you go at a lower temperature. You want a sweeter beer, you go at a higher temperature because you create more unfermentables. So the yeast can't eat the sugar, so there's more sugar in it. So like wine, you've got dry wine and sweet wine.
What would be an example of a sweeter beer? A lighter or a darker? Or a...
Usually darker beers. They're darker beers, stouts, porters are emphasizing the malt. So you don't put a lot of hops into it. You want to showcase the malt, and you want to taste all these different complex chocolate flavors, coffee flavors, toasty flavors. Starch to sugar, it's dry. It's got to be wet. So, we're going to make it quiet. Slow down the agitator. Get rid of that annoying hum. So that's all homogeneously mixed in there. Nice. I now have to, as brewers, we clean as we go. You can't have dried stuff everywhere. It's harder to clean when it dries, so it's always rinsing and hosing stuff down.
Drop cell phones into the brew.
Knives, screwdrivers. Yes. It has happened. And we have really hard water here. And hard water is really good for dark beers. It accentuates malt. Soft water is better for hobby beers. So I could change my water. You know, a lot of breweries that use surface water, like in Phoenix, they have really shitty water. So they'll get an RO system. So you have naked water. It's just nothing in it. And then they'll add gypsum, which is calcium sulfate, to kind of mimic English pale ale water chemistry. You can add hardness. So if you start with naked water, you can, if you want to make a Czechoslovakian Pils, you can mimic that water. You want an English pale ale, you can mimic that water. We like our water, so we don't do anything to it, and we work around that. So maybe that's where compromises come in.
But maybe that gives this a regional, you know, this is, no other beer could ever be just like Oak Creek's.
Exactly.
Because
so our water and the 300 different kinds of malt and the 300 kinds of yeast and the 200 kind of hops. So yeah, but crazy water supply times 300 times 300 times 200. That's how many different beers I can make. That's a shitload of different beers.
Yeah.
And that's why 3,000 breweries in the U.S. can all make a pale ale, and they're all going to taste a little bit different.
So, what does a delivery of malt look like? How many pounds, how often are you receiving?
The bag malt comes in 2,000-pound pallets.
Oh.
And my grain silo, which is outside, is my base malt, is 40,000 pounds. And I go through that every 2 months. The yeast is already in the tank, and we'll be adding hops during our boil.
So this is half of the 4 ingredients in every batch.
My name's Lori Moore.
And you said you've been doing this here for about 15 years, but you remember the first year they opened 20 years ago. It's an anniversary year.
Yeah. Was here visiting at the time.
Are you enjoying the smell? It's like mopping in a bakery, I think.
I love the smell.
Yeah, it's
It
nice.
took me a while to even identify what it was, but I love the smell.
Were you a customer when they first opened?
Yes.
And are you still?
Yes. Yes, we come for, they have weekly drum circles and other wonderful things they offer, so we're here pretty often.
Oh, you're a drummer.
Yes.
And you have your own hand drums?
Yes.
Very nice. You do that outside? Or
Actually in here. Yep, they move everything away, and so really the beer gets to enjoy that vibration too. That
That's
gets sent out too,
true.
doesn't it?
Oh, that's a very special
Yeah.
ingredient.
Yeah.
And you like to dance?
Yes.
And did you make a lot of friends here when you got here?
Oh yes, yeah.
Good.
You know, that's something that's really beautiful about the brewery too. It's different than any other, say, bar in town. This is kind of like Sedona's living room. And that's kind of how everybody treats it when they come.
Oh, it's pretty full. Let's look at the full size of this vessel again. Up on the platform. And the full size of the mash kettle is actually bigger than when you look inside from the top.
Like cement, you're not going to have a very good rinsing process, and we may have to stop and chop it up. Stop and chop, which is never fun. Just doing this once.
So the readiness factor is when the husk has absorbed enough of the fluid, your paddle should slice through the mass as though it were like soft butter.
Ideally, that way the water that we're going to sprinkle on top of it can work its way down through. Otherwise, it would just go around and not rinse the sugar.
And that would be a stuck mash.
That'd be a stuck mash.
And that would also happen even if you had barley grain but you cracked it too fine or...
Too fine, started lautering too fast and created suction, which would compact it down.
So Jim is constantly stirring. Is this wort yet? This isn't wort yet.
This is mash.
Mash. Jim's constantly stirring the mash in this kettle to loosen it up so that it can transfer into the lauter tun, which he also must keep stirring to keep it from getting stuck. So
All of our other beers that we're not using wheat malt, I don't have to stir it like this. The wheat malt
okay.
is real gummy, and the rice hulls you have to incorporate. So brewing a Hefeweizen is it's a lot more painful than a regular all malt beer, all barley beer.
Jim mentioned that this job keeps him on his toes enough to where it covers his gym membership.
Well, what made me want to make beer in the first place was Goose Island back in 1993. I was visiting my sister and went to their brew pub
Where's Goose Island?
in Chicago.
Oh,
And had my first craft beer, Honker's Ale. And it was like every other beer I had in my life was black and white. And when I drank the Honker's Ale, it was Technicolor. It was that much of a difference. It was like, this is so amazingly delicious. I'm gonna try to make this. So I started home brewing in 1993. There was all kinds of beer styles up until 1920, before Prohibition. Prohibition hits, it's illegal to drink beer, spirits, whatever. So only the big brewing companies survived. They made malt products, and who knows what they made, but they sold other stuff to survive for 13 years. 1933 rolls around, all the small breweries are out of business, and they all make light-colored, clear beer with no flavor. So when they started making beer again, people didn't want dark, heavy stuff. They wanted accessible beer. And from the 30s until the 80s, well, that's 50 years of people being used to shitty, yellow, fizzy beer. And craft brewing starts making a scene in the mid-80s. And it's taken 25, 30 years to shift what people perceive beer is. In the 80s, beer was yellow, fizzy shit. Now it's red and orange and copper and mahogany and brown and black and, you know, all these different great styles. I rinsed out our kettle. That just had 300 gallons of liquid and 1,200 pounds of grain in it.
with the hatch on the lauter tun. Oh, and this is full to the brim now.
This is full. This is resting. The hot water is turning the enzymes on and converting that starch into sugar.
And how long is the resting period?
We always rest it for 45 minutes. We'll check it for conversion.
With the iodine?
The iodine. And then we'll Vorloff it, which is basically recirculate it for 10 minutes, and then we'll lauter it. And when we Vorloff, we will take the liquid off the bottom and put it back onto the top. And then the grain itself acts as its own natural filter. So we'll take cloudy liquid off the bottom, put it back on top, and it runs through the grain and the hulls, and the grain traps the particulate. And after about 10 minutes, that cloudy liquid will be really nice and shiny.
So you will drain this sugar water through the grain back into the mash kettle and then back over the spent grain into the lauter tun again?
I could do it that way.
Okay.
I have the pipes to do it, but there's another pipe that will go right from the bottom of this tank to the pump back up to a spray bowl.
Oh, okay.
So it'll just go from the bottom and go back up top. So it creates a loop, it recirculates, and it will not percolate, it'll just travel through the grain to the bottom and back up, and that process will filter it and clarify it.
So it's coming
Out of those three
out of the
those three
tank
pipes
this
go
way,
into one,
down
downstairs,
into there.
down into a pump, and it comes back up.
And now it's cycling back in until it runs clear.
So that liquid will run through all that grain that's in there, and when that's clear, we will start lautering. There's a sight glass straight back there,
Okay.
and when I turn this on, that sight glass will start seeing movement there. It's starting to go there, and it's real cloudy right now, and in about 10 minutes it will clear up, and when I see that it's clear, I will open a valve which will send it to the kettle.
Okay. So that's the cyclops. And it's cloudy, and he's waiting to see that that's clear so he can send it into the kettle.
Days in a row to fill this tank right here.
So that's 3 batches, one of which we're making today.
Correct. So we'll get done with that on Monday. I have another open fermenter right here, so we're gonna brew into that on Tuesday and Wednesday. We're doing Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday here. So that would make all my tanks full. I have to always be thinking 3 weeks into the future from today on what I need. Sometimes we'll filter 3 or 4 tanks, and then bam, you're 8 days behind. And then there's one more chart here, which has each tank has to go through. It has to go through certain temperature drops. You can't go from room temperature down to 30 degrees instantly. That way I can just look at this and know where each tank is. Because I can't remember all that, which changes daily. Valve will open the top spray ball. This valve, which goes into a pump back to the top, set the speed.
So Jim took a sample of his sugar water, which is wort, and he's going to look for color with the iodine.
We're basically the iodine that turns dark is indicating that starch is present. So this isn't showing us sugar, it's showing us there's no starch, which means now it's sugar. But this indicates starch or lack of it. Come up here and check out. I'm going, if you can stand here in a couple minutes, in a couple seconds, I'm going to start filling the kettle.
Alright, so Jim will be opening the valves to transfer from the lauter tun back into the mash kettle, or the brewing kettle.
Just come in here.
And here it comes.
will take about an hour and a half to fill up to our fill height. When we cover the bottom, we turn our steam on. You can see the squares down there. That's the steam jacket.
Oh, okay.
And then, so we got a bottom jacket and we have a side jacket. You guys can see 3 rings.
Yeah.
So when those get covered, we'll turn the side steam on. So this is heated by steam. Let's make sure that our kettle is closed. I don't want to send. So right now, what we're putting in there is liquid gold. That's the sugar that we made. And in a few minutes, we're going to start adding water into the lauter tun. So we're going to start
Sparging?
sparging. You sparge during your lauter.
Technically, when does the mash become a wort?
That's wort.
Okay. When it's strained and sparged from the grain, but before any ethanol or carbon dioxide has been produced.
Right.
Okay.
Basically, this is wort, unhopped. Once we get this filled in and start boiling, we'll add hops to it to give us our bitterness, flavor, and aroma. And that becomes hopped wort. When we transfer this into our fermenter, where our yeast is, it'll be mixed in. So the 4 ingredients of beer will be mixed together, and that's called guile. And then about 8 hours later, after the lag phase kicks in, the yeast will wake up and start eating that sugar. And then it becomes beer. Once alcohol or CO2 is being made, it's beer. I'm going to turn on the sparge water. Kind of just like have a nice gentle umbrella.
And so that's pure water. That's not the wort coming back up.
That is hot water.
Okay.
Hot city water. Put your hand on this pipe.
Very cold.
48 degrees. That's what's chilling the beer.
Oh, okay. This is cold water.
That's cold water.
Okay.
Put your hand on that pipe.
Warm.
It's 80 degrees.
Okay.
That's the temperature that I ferment the Hefe at.
Okay.
And
So the Hefe's at 80 degrees and it's coming through this pipe. And this large vessel is
cold liquor tank.
holding the cold liquor that will bring the Hefe to temperature so that it doesn't kill the yeast.
And then this cold water gets hot because it chills the beer. The hot beer gets cold and the cold water gets hot. And the hot water goes back into my hot liquor tank. So I'm recycling 1,000 gallons of water.
Okay.
So this was 1,000 gallons. It was cold.
Uh-huh.
I chill the beer down. It goes back into the hot liquor tank. And then tomorrow I use that hot liquor tank to sparge my beer.
Okay.
And clean. So I'm repurposing and trying to recycle as much as I can. We use a lot of water in the brewing industry. That feels beautiful. What we want to do, you see the level of the top of the liquid there is about 2 inches below that plate. I want it to go down about 4 inches under there. And then if it gets to 4 inches below, we can regulate this amount of water. If the water's coming up, I slow it down. If it's dropping down too fast, I'll speed up the water. So you want to get it to a certain point and then keep it balanced. But we also have our reserve series, which we do quarterly. So right now we have our Scotch Ale on kind of our, used to be our winter warmer or Christmas beer, but now we're doing that every winter. And that's a 9% alcohol beer, and we'll do that every winter, and it'll vary from year to year. We want to change it up. We can experiment with it and have fun with it, because we're not trying to be consistent. And hey, let's try this. Let's try a little bit more of this smoked malt, or let's try some of this roasted barley or whatever. And like to have fun with it. The other beers we do all the time, we have to adhere to our policies and our guidelines to it. Really try to be consistent with it. The next one we're doing is a chocolate cherry porter. So the porter is made already, and then we are taking cherries and Ecuadorian cacao nibs, chocolate nibs, and we'll be adding that into the fermenter and dry hopping it and getting that chocolatey and cherry essence into it.
The nibs are literally real chocolate?
Yeah, it's real.
Very
It's
good.
the cacao bean. It's what you use to make chocolate. So you get this super nice aroma. We won a silver medal for our pale ale at the Great American Beer Fest a couple years ago. And we won a gold medal for the Hefeweizen back in 2003, my first year here. And at that point, there were 68 other beers in that category. So being judged the best out of 68 is pretty good. We're happy to get that award. Doing the chocolate cherry porter and the nut brown on steroids and all these different fun beers. They're fun because they're new and you get to experiment with. So in 20 years of brewing, I mean literally probably 4,000 or 5,000 batches of beer, I've never dumped a batch of beer down the drain. As long, being clean and sanitary and following your procedures can maintain that, and it's a badge of honor for me. I really take it extremely seriously, and I'm not saving the world by what I'm doing, but I act like I am. It's one of those things that I take it extremely seriously. All my guys that I train, they have to learn it that way or they're not going to last here. It's different because the Hefeweizen, we always, the previous day, we add the yeast and we add some wort into it, about 10 gallons, to give it a starter.
So you did all that yesterday?
So that's all done. So our tank is clean, which is nice because first day brews are extremely hectic. Second day brews this is like a second day brew, and
it's considered a second day brew basically because you've primed the yeast already?
Right.
Okay.
But it's unusual too because that 45 barrel tank that we have will hold 3 15-barrel batches of beer. My brew house is 15 barrels.
Oh, okay.
So
this is the brew house.
Most of our fermenters are 30-barrel fermenters.
Okay.
So we always do 2 batches.
I'm sorry, I forget what a barrel is compared to a keg.
2 kegs is a barrel.
Okay.
That's why they're called half barrels.
Oh, okay.
And a half barrel is 15.5 gallons. So a barrel is 31 gallons. So if you do 30 times 31, you should get 930. I don't know if the math is right on that, but.
Oh, here's the grain.
This is
spent mash
yesterday's mash, which will get picked up.
Oh, so this is what the ranchers will come for, and they'll supplement their feed with this. And this is barley?
That's barley.
Spent
our
barley.
Spent mash, and
Starting to smell.
There's still sugar in it, but it's starting to
ferment, or it's. spoil.
break
Yeah.
down.
It's got a sort of a sour, earthy smell already.
Yeah, it starts to sour.
But
Exactly.
lots of bins full of
We're
or
filling
bins for grain.
We're filling these today.
So these will be from today's spent grain.
And this is, you just said souring. That's exactly how you make sour mash whiskey.
Oh.
You get the grain wet and you let it set like this for a day or 2 days. It's not raw. It's actually really refined because the beers that we're making today, we're going to be drinking in 3 weeks. The Rodenbach beer, depends on which one. The Grand Cru is 3 years old. It takes that long for the organisms, the Brettanomyces and the Lactobacillus and Pediococcus, they eat sugar slower. The Saccharomyces cerevisiae, the ale yeast, works really fast. It'll be fermented in a week.
So that style's in the yeast.
It's in the yeast, and it's getting flavor from other organisms besides brewer's yeast.
Okay. So these numbers are an indicator for Jim that his mash is draining really quickly because he set his limit at 212, and normally he'd be closer to 180 in temperature right now if it were draining slower. And since he's at 173, he knows he's got a good efficient draining through the grains right now.
I think a lot of the charities found out early in the craft beer revolution that they could make a lot of money holding beer festivals. And when we opened up 20 years ago, there wasn't really, I mean, it's such a new thing. So we had a very symbiotic relationship. We would donate beer to these nonprofits and groups that, charitable groups. So we would donate beer, they would sell the beer and get the money for it. Yeah, we do a lot with Sun Sounds, Arizona. They donate, they champion the cause of the hearing impaired. So these beer festivals raise a lot of money for hearing aids and everything that's associated with their cause. We also do the Boys and Girls Club and certain local charities here in Sedona. There's so many festivals now. I couldn't afford to do all the festivals.
Jim, what were the styles of hops I was just smelling in the fermenter for the pale ale?
We used Cascade, Centennial, and Citra. A lot of the sea hops. All these really nice American pale ales and IPAs have they're called the sea hops. You got Citra, you got Cascade, you got Columbus, Centennial, Chinook. They all have this really nice dank, kind buddy smell. You have all sorts of citrus and pine, resin. Hops are, they're in the cannabis family. So if you've ever smelled really stinky weed, the sea hops smell like weed. But I came up with a name, the C-Note Pale Ale, have a $100 bill. But obviously, I'm not that. I was late to the party because I Googled it, and there were probably 6 or 7 other.
We're adding the hops.
Time for the first hop charge. As we put them in here.
Nice foamy green.
You see how it's going to start to come up a little bit.
ones are dissolving.
They're just separating. Okay, I'll turn the hops used to be grown on the East Coast, and then Oregon and Washington State are where the majority of the hops are grown and produced for big breweries and for craft brewers. Heat back up. When it foams up like that, a lot of it will stick to the sides. It doesn't do me any good to have them on the side. I want them in the beer. See, I like looking at those, that crinkly look there.
Yeah.
With my camera, I would zoom in on it really close, so just to show the pattern, and somebody who, basically anybody wouldn't know what they're looking at.
Sort of like the swirl in a latte.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, out of context, that could be good or bad.
Right, they're like, what am I looking at? Is that an alligator? They were backing out the door right here with a 180-degree grain on them, trip over this and fall.
Every one of them?
Everyone fall, grain come down on them.
Ah, Jim, could we stage that today and just show it?
No.
Oh, too bad. It open. These will be more for, not as much for bittering and more for taste. And this is the second of the 3 editions, and the last one will be more for aroma. And so I've been here since 4 in the morning, and Sedona is waking up, and it looks like a sunny winter day with a pretty sky here in Arizona. 4 bins later, Jim has shoveled the grain out of the water tank, and it's down to the bottom. So Jim explained that each one of these screens that came out of the lauder tun is about $3,000, and so he's got to be really careful. They're heavy, about not dropping them, and making sure that new brewers don't bang the Jesus out of them when they're shoveling out the spent grain. Brewing equipment is it usually made in the US or in Europe?
Used to be German and American. The last 10 years, Chinese. A lot of breweries buy cheap China stuff. We only buy American made. You know, there's Canadian and American stainless steel tanks are really good. They're expensive, but they're good. Because I'm brewing.
Final stage of hops, the 3rd edition into the Hefeweizen. These are primarily aroma hops, right, Jim?
They are.
And how much time is left now in this boil?
10 minutes.
Now this is well before the hours, but this is the setup with the fire pit in the beer garden, or the nice patio to sit outside when the weather's right, which is a lot of the year down here in Sedona. A little chilly on this winter morning, but even the afternoons here in the winter are pretty nice. There's, you know, still some surviving plants. So Jim will be sanitizing the the line or the pipeways that the beer comes through.
Beer's gonna come through this pipe, through the heat exchanger, out this sight glass, and through some pipes. So we're gonna run some sanitizer backwards through that loop.
So we're going to go to the end point and load it with sanitizer, I think, and let it run through the line back to where it'll start.
Open this valve up.
To begin the knockout from the kettle vessel to
Knockout
the
is the brewer's
fermenter.
term for transferring from the kettle into the fermenter. So now I'm going to push out the water that I sanitized with until it turns to beer, and then I'll double switch it. Turn.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, and then that's clear beer. Watch your toes. Now these pipes are super hot because that's boiling, so I'm sanitizing the manifold in case it wasn't sanitized before. It's sanitary now.
Wow, it smells wonderful, like baking grains.
For beer, but air is good for starting a new batch of beer. The air will kickstart the yeast into action because it's hibernating right now. I took a sample out of the kettle. That's really hot. That's 200 degrees. So I'm going to chill it down, and then I'm going to put it into a beaker and test it for the sugar content. Got a sacrometer
Okay.
or hydrometer. I'll
Hydrometer.
Put that, hydrometer or sacrometer. Sacrometer measures sugar. So this is a scale. Some people use specific gravity. Some people use balling. We use Play-Doh. Play-Doh is a more accurate version of balling. And this will float, and the scale will tell me. I'm kind of shooting for about a 12 Play-Doh. And then there's a temperature correction. So if it's hot, you add to your number, or if it's colder, you subtract from your number. So you get an accurate, you're basically just measuring the density compared to water. And this scale knows the ratio between water and sugar. It's purely for alcohol content. If you know where you start and you know where you finish, you got your original gravity and your terminal gravity. If it starts at 13 Play-Doh and goes down to a 3 Play-Doh, the difference is 10. So there's a formula. You multiply it times 0.4167. Will give you your alcohol by weight.
He's already back at the fermenter, switching his valves.
We can see the beer going in the tank.
And here it comes all the way from the neighboring room, through the hose, and into the fermenter.
8 hours of our day making sugar will be beer in about 8 hours. And it'll take about 3 weeks before it's aged and ready to drink, but it's being born today.
Jim, is there a phase where you strain it out of the yeast and then allow it to age? Or will it stay on the yeast for 3 weeks?
That's why these tanks are cone shaped, because after about a week the yeast will stop working and it'll sink, and then I drop yeast down the drain, or I take that yeast and put it into another tank for my next brew. So these are called unit tanks.
How many batches would you normally get out of a strain of yeast before it mutates?
Usually about 15 generations.
Oh, that's pretty much.
So I'm on generation 4 on all these tanks. So 4 times 11. So I've gotten 44 batches of beer out of my last pure culture from the lab.
And that starts as a liquid yeast?
Liquid yeast, and I get a new culture sent to me every 3 months.
Oh, okay. So one culture every 3 months brews all your styles, all your beer for 3 months.
Yeah.
And that's what?
And that's what's going on in this tank right here. We got the yeast. I brewed this yesterday, and the yeast is eating the sugar, and it's making alcohol and CO2. So it's building pressure in here, and that pressure has to go somewhere, or the tank will blow up.
And that's that pressure right there.
And the pressure, it's coming out the top of the spray ball and down in here, and this is called a water lock.
Spray balls way up there, and
This-
it allows the CO2 to be released so you don't have an explosion inside your vessel.
Right, and with it being in water, no contaminants can go into the tank.
Okay.
It's locked. So it's a one-way valve, essentially. So pressure can go out, but nothing can go into the tank. So that's 3,000 6-packs a week.
For about 9 years.
Probably. So the filter's done here. Take it apart. The filter pads are cellulose material, and they get thrown out. You can't reuse them because they've trapped all the stuff that we don't want.
And then they become beer colored.
I filtered nut brown, which is brown.
Oh, yeah.
One of the compromises that you make in filtering beer, you get nice, clear, shiny beer that's pretty to look at, but you are stripping, you're capturing aroma and color in these filter sheets. And another beautiful thing about beer is no known pathogens can live in beer. So you may have good bacteria in there or bad bacteria that causes off flavors, but it's not going to hurt you. So, 1,000 years ago, in the Dark Ages, people who drank water died, and people who drank beer lived.
I think I read it was sort of a mistake and something was left to ferment and then it became...
That's the origin of beer, 5,000 years ago. They were, aging barley in clay pots, and wild yeast got into it, rain got into it, and it fermented, and they drank it, like, oh, I feel good. So they put more grain into another clay pot, added water, they drank it, and it's like, this doesn't taste good. I don't feel any different. But they kept putting water and grain in the other pot, and they would get buzzed from it. It's like, this is the magic pot. We don't know why, but when I put grain and water in this pot, I feel it, but not this one. Well, the yeast, the living organism, was living in the clay, so you would ferment in that pot, and it wouldn't ferment in the other one. That's 5,000 years ago. Nobody knew what the hell was going on. It wasn't until 1700 something, Louis Pasteur made the microscope and could look at cells. And oh my God, this little thing called yeast eats sugar and makes alcohol. But for 5,000 years, nobody knew what was going on. It's unbelievable.
So Jim himself is not a real fan of adding that flavoring, but they have a customer who really enjoys it, so he's willing to do it. Is that an ingredient to give it flavor?
Yeah, this is a natural orange cream flavor, natural type. So it's got mandarin orange and vanilla.
And so Jim will add that right into the keg to design the brew just the way their customer wanted it. Adding a little CO2 into the keg to push the beer out. So that he can give the beer to the keg with the flavor for his special order kegs today. See, these are the touches that keep Jim's customers happy. So that was quite a bit of transfer work to properly add the flavor to a keg without incurring risk for contamination or oxidation. And Jim went to every painstaking step to do that process the proper way. Jim, what's the bright beer tank for? I forget.
It's where we filter the beer out of the fermenter. So the cloudy beer comes out of the fermenter and it turns clear, it turns bright. So they're called bright tanks.
Okay.
But we like to reward our loyal customers. So if you come out here, we got a mug club.
Oh.
So those are 20-ounce steins. And normal people, tourists, pay the same price for a 16-ounce beer, and our mug club members get a 20-ounce beer for the same price. And we do special promotional events. Anybody, when you sign up for the mug club, it's $50 a year. You get a hat and t-shirt, and then you're on the email mailing list. So we'll do potluck dinners, we'll do special beer promotions.
Okay, so this is the boiling kettle is now.
My hole that I'm drawing out of is here on the side. The trube pile is in the center.
Yeah.
And the drain hole's in the center, but my knockout hole, that way I'm not sucking green trube and protein chunks. And you can see the stuff that's on the propeller down there, right? That's trube.
And so trube would be considered not exactly a byproduct, but just basically a solid that you're straining off.
It gets precipitated out. It's called the hot break. So when you boil it for an hour and a half, the protein dissolves. It comes out of solution into a solid. We have water coming in the side. So what we'll be doing is we'll be sucking water out the bottom, and it'll go through the heat exchanger, through the hose, to the fermenter. It's not going to go in the fermenter because it's coming back on that hose we just put on, and it's going to come back into the tank here. So we're just going to recirculate it so all the hoses and pipes and the metal sees moving chemical.
So around here at the brewery, the smell of neutral or just metal means a job well done and sanitized equipment. What do you think of that, Scotty?
I love the smell of metal.
What's your name?
Cole?
And you're not photogenic.
No.
I think you are. That hat just makes you look like a star. Yeah.
Thank God for that hat. I love my job.
little magic place where you see the beer line tubes actually inserted into the top of the bottle. So it took about 12 seconds to fill. And similar here on the other side, these actually clamp a cap down onto the bottle and out it comes. So I noticed you had these bright green
Yeah.
red feathers.
Yeah.
Feather in your cap.
Right.
So where did those feathers come from?
Oh, it comes from a guy named Mark. Has a bird named Coco.
What kind of bird?
It's like a parrot.
Oh, okay. Not exactly a local bird.
No.
Well, I'm glad that you were able to make use of Coco's sacrifice.
Yeah, you're right. It is Coco's kind of sacrifice.
So we are not bottling the Pepe that we have been showing the brewing process of. That is a precious 3 days old in the fermenter, and we'll have almost 3 more weeks. And so this is the bright tank vessel that this amber ale that we're bottling today has been maturing in for probably about 3 weeks. So I've been permitted to run loose on my own in the facility, and it sounds like this is the device that is responsible for controlling the flow of the CO2, and that runs up this pipeway, and then here we're getting down to the place where the hose is connected and the beer is released, and follows this path over to the bottling machine. What's the carb stone?
That's the carbonation stone. The stainless steel sintered stone
Okay.
that bubbles, that uses the CO2 so it absorbs into the beer.
Ah,
But for the most part, we try to naturally carbonate the beer. That's why we have those gauges on those tanks.
uh-huh.
So I have 100 kegs of beer in here right now, and it's almost carbonated perfectly. So we're gonna touch it up for 15 minutes, and it'll be ready to bottle at a 2.5 volume CO2.
Are these pallets of amber ale basically one full batch of beer?
No, this is 180 cases that we're gonna fill on Monday.
Oh, okay.
They're empty. This much beer, 180 cases, is half a tank.
Half a tank, okay.
Maybe a third of a tank.
Oh.
Probably get 8 stacks out of that tank.
Little bottle cap jam, and Scotty's gotta work this. Scotty, you have an internet radio station.
Yeah, the station's called Metal World Radio, www.metalworldradio.com. And you just, you connect and you promote bands and play music and promote your local scene and shows and play the music that you love. I love music. I love all kinds of music. People jump in the chat room and request tunes and just hang out and have a good time, and it's all about the music. MetalWorldRadio.com.
You're the hot dog man. Nice. Ooh, and there's even chips and looks like nice fresh rolls. Nice fresh local rolls, it looks like.
Yeah.
And there's a nice menu here with different styles of hot dogs and some nachos and even a meatball sandwich. Anything you want to share about why you like the Oak Creek Brewery tasting room, or the...
We just made a wrong turn.
Oh.
And the nuts are a bonus on top of it.
Oh, very good.
Nut brown on steroids, which will be in the summer.
We have a wedding in May, and we want to do local beer and local wine.
The nut brown on steroids.
Okay.
And that did.
Okay. Yeah, that was awesome. That gave it that brown last year.
And that I may have it by next year.
Okay. So I'll give you a call a few weeks before. Yeah, that would be awesome. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
What were we talking about?